Okay, welcome to the Rebound Live webcast. I'm fired up this week. Special guest, Jon Reid. We're going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, DE&I, which is such a hot topic. And I just look forward to learning more from the expert. Jon's the managing vice president and partner with Tier 1 Management Consulting Group. He leads the diversity, equity, inclusion practice and has built a team of certified DE&I consulting strategists, organizational trainers, and a broad catalog of DE&I course curriculum, which includes an array of topics such as anti-racism, explicit and unconscious bias, and diversity in the workforce. Over 35 years of experience, both as a management consultant and executive industry leader. He served in executive positions, chief financial officer at several GE business units and the Art Institute of Atlanta. Jon is a certified diversity professional by Cornell University, and I could go on and on. Most importantly, I think he's a good guy and a bad golfer. That's my breakdown so far.
Hey, and we have something in common then, Matt.
Yeah, well, we got something in common. We've got something in common. This is how the next hour will go. I'd like everybody to mute their mics. This will be recorded. Please be on video unless you're driving. Raise your hand if you have a thought or a question. And those of you that are on the Rebound Live for the first time, please put your name and email in the chat. Considering that we already have 35, and I'm thinking we're going to have over 50, when it gets to the Q&A, we might manage that through the chat room, because just to save time and be as efficient as possible. So I'm just fired up, Jon, to have you here at a time where our country seems very divided amongst a lot of topics, especially diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think when some people see that term, one, they might not know what it is. I thought DE&I was like a government agency first, and then tried to do my study. And then as a 60-year-old white male, had some inherent biases, some concerns, some fears. So that's why I reached out to you. And I just really going to give you the next 20 minutes to kind of go, and I'll interrupt maybe once in a while. And in the meantime, if people can please mute your mics, that would be great. And Jon, take it away.
So Matt, when you and I talked, and informally, we talked about a lot of people really they do not know what the definitions are of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? In fact, part of the advertisement and branding you put out at first said equality, right?
Yep,
and I didn't know. Which is different from equity. So I said, well, let's start off by just having the conversation about what do those terms actually really mean, and why are we even here? And unfortunately, it took, because we all live in a homogeneous bubble, and sometimes our only interaction in the past was with people who look like us. And unfortunately, with the death of George Floyd in 2020 and then the pandemic, we're isolating. It became more apparent that we needed to have these tough conversations about where we're at, why are we here, what are we doing? So one of the first things I wanted to do was say, hey, what is the definitions, and why is it so important, and why is it not like check the box compliance activity anymore? How it's important to our daily living, and for instance, I'll give you an example. Diversity really is like getting the invitation to come to the prom. Mm-hmm. Inclusion is when I get to the prom, I'm asked to dance, right? So that's how I look at it in terms of give me an invitation to the dance. And then when I get there, include me and ask me to dance. Now, I can't dance, but still, just being invited and asked to makes me feel inclusive. I'm part of the group now, right? So diversity is like diversity definition, just look at it this way. It's taking a wide variety of our shared and our different personal beliefs among human beings and putting them in the same room, right? And so I gave Matt a graphic of that, which I think will probably be pretty important for you guys to look at. And then equity and equality. There's a difference between the two. And I think most people in this space of DE&I understand the differences between the two. So Matt, I don't know if can you share that one slide? I want to show you graphically the difference.
Then if you get over to my left.
Okay, hold. All right, Stephanie, can you pull that slide up and send that to me? The one.
Or if you want me to share my screen, I can do that.
Yeah. If you could, well, yes. I hope if you have that ability.
Yeah, I do. My granddaughter taught me this.
Okay.
So can you see that?
Yes.
So I use this slide a lot. Equality means all three of us have the same box. The box is the same size. The box is equal, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right? But if I'm 6 feet and you 2 feet, or if I'm disabled, that box means nothing to me, right? Equity means all of us can see the same thing at the same time. So consider all of our social identifiers, race, gender, our economic status. To be equitable, it's an ideal. It's the goal. It's not a process. It ensures that everyone has the right resources that they need to succeed. So I love this slide because people say equality and they get the term mixed up because everything is not equal, right? So we have to do work to ensure that, that we include equity as part of the process. And so that's the slide I wanted to show you guys. And then there's inclusion. And so inclusion is, the fact that we need to have the shared and a safe space where we all can then be comfortable in having these tough discussions. For instance, Matt had a discussion with me as a 60-year-old white man with things he didn't know, but it was a safe space for us to discuss those differences. Mm-hmm. So now Matt is really more inclusive of having these conversations with me because now he can understand where we're coming from. And so I look at it like this. Since 2020, we've been.
To my left?
Someone's off mute.
Yeah, I need to be able to mute everybody, and I'm struggling. Here we go.
So the whole impetus is that sometimes either consciously or unconsciously we self-segregate. And why do we do that, right? Because we're afraid sometimes to have those safe conversations, those psychological conversations with someone that doesn't look like us. And then when COVID happened, all of our information was coming through social media, right? Social media or the news. So if we already had a bias in our mind about how people are, those biases were increased because now we're at home filling our heads and our information and, with the same ideas that we probably already had. Or just being around the people that look like us because it's comfortable to us. So the goal is, and I call this DEI 2.0, is to have those safe conversations, get out of the box and then understand where other people are coming from, and then trying to recognize our unconscious biases because we all have them. And I was sharing a story with Matt the other day about my own bias because we all have them, right? So one of my biases was, I used to think that female truck drivers couldn't drive. I'm like, if it's a female truck driver, she cannot drive. Now that's biased on my part, right? It is really biased on my part to even be comfortable enough to say that to you, but that was one of my biases. And why did I have that bias? Probably because, I don't know, maybe a female truck driver hit me in the past or something happened, I don't know. But I had to then consciously say to myself, why do you have that bias, Jonathan? That bias is wrong. So let me now think before I act or speak or say anything. So now I've recognized the bias. Now I can correct that bias. So a lot of times with this DE&I, diversity, equity, inclusion, it forces us to look at our biases and then confront them and then try to change them. And so I wrote an article one time. It's called, me and another guy, we wrote an article called, don't put the cart before the horse. Don't put the training cart before the horse, the diversity training cart before the horse. It's not just training. It is. So what we try to do with organizations that we work with a lot of public sector entities, is we talk about strategies, like make it, and it's data driven. How do we get there? But we hide behind the data. I use that term interchangeably.
Right.
We hide behind the data. And that data says that your organization is 90% male oriented. That means that what are you doing in recruiting females, right? Or your organization is 90% white. What are you doing to increase the minority participation in your organization? Or the data may say that the leaders are looking at the organization one way and actual worker bees are looking at the organization another way. So we hide behind coming up with a strategy first versus just training, because people use training to check the box. Oh man, I gotta go to this training. There's diversity training. And then you check the box off, I've done diversity training, but what did you learn? And has your behaviors actually changed? So we say, don't put the training cart before the strategy horse. And we actually wrote an article about that, which actually got some pretty good traction. And then, you know that diversity, equity, inclusion is really about, my practice says show social equity. So that means there's health equity involved, there's economic equity, there's judicial equity, there's workforce equity. So, healthcare equity. And so it involves all these things to come to a point where we have equity in all these environments that we actually live in day to day. But then once again, how do we get there? That's that's the goal. How do we get there? And it's more than just training. Now, I will say though that for leaders, I have a training program that we actually put leaders through just so they know and can recognize the terms and the definitions. But that's not enough. How do we then permeate that from the leaders down to the rest of the team? So what we would like to do is set up goals, right? And each goal may have an initiative. So your goal may be to increase participation of your organization, to have more people of color, or to have more gender-specific individuals in your organization. And so that's the goal. But what are the initiatives to get to that specific goal? You have to have initiatives, right? So you might have, and they have to be workable. So I suggest having 3 initiatives for those goals. And the first one could be, maybe I recruit in areas that I didn't recruit in before. Or number 2, maybe I have an employee resource group, ERG is what they call them. Maybe I have an ERG that takes people in my organization and their interests, and they have a group, and then I know maybe I can recruit with them. I'll give you a perfect example. So Matt asked me a question. He said, what are some of the hurdles? Some of the hurdles are with leaders. And one example I gave him was there was a police force in North Carolina. They had their own recruiting outside of the regular HR recruiting for the staff. But the police recruiting was disparate, meaning that everybody they recruited looked like them, and they were 90% white males. So it became a problem with the whole county. And the issue was because everybody in the police force was referring their friends who looked like them. And if you want to have a more diverse police force, you got to go outside of just recruiting your friends and say, hey, listen, maybe I need to go to this organization. Maybe I need to go to the Latinx Heritage Committee or Council. Maybe I need to go to an HBCU. Maybe I need to start recruiting at places where I normally don't recruit. Now I'm starting to build a more inclusive workforce. Doesn't happen overnight, but you have to think like that to make change happen. Right? So our end goal is to be more of a human society where we are respectful of somebody that doesn't look like us or doesn't think like us, but we can have those safe conversations. So Matt, I don't know if 20 minutes is up.
Listen, I just love this, and thank you for being on. And what I've tried to do here is to create a safe place for us to come together as men, women, black, white, and everybody else, every different gender, every different color, different religion, and make it a safe place, because we don't have safe places anymore. It seems like everything's done on social media, and it immediately, if they don't, we want diversity, but as long as you agree with our thinking, and
right.
if you express diversity, then we get angry. And I talk about core values. My core values are respect, trust, commitment, and positivity. So I want everything done in a respectful manner. I want there to be trust, that you can say something here and it won't be held against you, that we're committed to the same thing, which is a commitment towards improving society. Like, at the end of the day, we're going to be gone. What's going to be left for our kids and our kids' kids? And then do it in a positive attitude. Like, we can, like to me, humor needs to have a place where, like, John, you can make fun of me as a 6-year-old white male, and maybe I can make fun of you, and we can make fun of our differences, and that's cool. Like, and I was blessed to grow up around basketball, and so I had been a part of integration since I was in grammar school, and then high school and college, and I was the minority.
Right.
And so it's just important to have these conversations in a safe place. So first of all, thank you.
No worries.
One thing, like, I think I'm afraid of for my children, for me, I'm 60, my son's 25, my daughter's 22, and you helped clear this up. Like, you said, this is, it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not affirmative action.
Right.
So explain that to the group, because I think we get, fears drive our biases, right? And then we get angry, and then that gets more divisive. So as a 6-year-old white male, I'm thinking, okay, I might
do
me
a favor and see if there's card stock in the printer. If not,
can you please mute?
Amazing.
There we go.
We're at Walmart in Boone, North Carolina.
Patrick, you got to mute.
Please mute. So, my fear is, okay, I might be able to be equal or better resume, but because I'm white, I won't have the opportunity. Mm-hmm. So tell me, that's a fear, right? That's a fear for me and my kids. Now I'm 60, so I'm kind of past a lot of that, but it might, young white males, mm-hmm. There's a fear that they're going to get excluded. Can you address that, John?
And so when I had a conversation, I said, we don't even use the term affirmative action. So in our D&I world of practice or consulting, and I'm sure there are any other D&I practitioners that are on here, we don't use the term affirmative action, because it puts a percentage, a goal, and it's like a compliance checkbox, right? Okay, I've checked the box, I've got 10% participation. And I don't like to use that. And in fact, what I said before is, like, we hide behind the data. The data will show you my organization looks like this. How do I change my organization to be more inclusive? Now, that doesn't put a percentage on what it should be. It just says, let me look at it and then affirm that we have change that we have to make. So, because if you use that term, affirmative action, you get a lot of people upset, especially older people like yourself, 60 years old.
Wait. I said I'm 60, and now you said older. Okay.
All right.
Yeah,
don't tell people that I'm 62.
Fair.
I'm also 60. Okay. So thank you for telling everybody how old I am, Matt. But yes, I am. We were born in the same year, Matt and I. Okay. But the thing is that certain generations, you cannot use certain terms anymore. We become more politically correct, but that affirmative action only applies a percentage. And those percentages are wrong, in fact, in my view. So we have to look at the organization and say, okay, listen, if this organization is 90% male, I know that is really incorrect because there are a lot of females who are smarter than we are. They need to be a part of this organization. But that's not applying a percentage to hiring or recruiting, right? You're looking at things in a different lens. And so management now has a new challenge to overcome. How can these leaders create diversity while fighting these headwinds that used to be in the past, right? So that's the challenge of leaders. Once leaders understand that, now they can start affecting change, if you will. So hopefully they answered that question, man.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. You talk about changing people's behavior. That, how do you do that? And what data do you use? What key performance KPIs, key performance indexes do you use?
Yeah. So, and that's key.
Indicators, rather.
Yeah. But so I'm glad you mentioned KPIs because that's actually huge. So what we do is like an online survey assessment, right? It's got 3 key elements in that survey assessment: a diagnosis, a perception gap analysis, and then recommendations to shift cultural change. So we get the survey out. We tell employees it's anonymous, meaning that it will not come back to haunt you. Your managers won't know. And this survey comes back and it shows you where you are in the DE&I spectrum. And so what it does is it compares your organization to about 1,500 other organizations that look like you. And so now we have a DE&I score. That score will then show you the disparity in all elements: belonging, inclusion, equity, access, all the elements of diversity, equity, inclusion. And those then will tell you exactly where do we need to be. And this comes with recommendations for change. And it shows you how you can then shift. So I like to give that assessment because then it's eye-opening. Some organizations I've dealt with do not even want to share the assessment results with their employees because it's so bad. But the data that's collected from the online survey provides insight into where you should be, where you should focus your efforts. Should your efforts focus on recruiting? Should your efforts focus on changing some of your policies, your HR policies? Should your efforts focus on having a training program, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what I like to say is that sometimes that data can only be derived by doing like the online survey, 10-minute survey, anonymous, you get your answers.
Is that survey available to anybody listening or on this call, or do you have to pay for it? How do you get access to a survey like?
Okay, you have to pay for it, of course.
Yep, no, that's fine. I mean, I get it. What does something like that cost the company?
So for I'm peeling the onion back and letting you know. So for me, it cost me $5,000 for the survey.
Gotcha.
But I customize the questions. So I've got a bank of about 200 questions I can use. I might not use all 200 questions. It's just based on your organization. And out of that, I then do the survey, and those questions, it could be 30 questions. Mm-hmm. Once I get those answers back from the 30 questions, I can tell your organization where you need to concentrate your efforts and where the gaps are, where the perception gaps are. And it's customizable. So, me as a firm, I have to buy the survey myself and then send it out. And then, I have to charge the clients. But
no, I get it. You didn't have to tell us your cost, but that I'm just trying to, how can we, and what's the sweet spot for that? Is that a company over 50 employees, 25, over 100?
We've done organizations, a lot of times in the public sector, city council members, it might be only 20 members, 20 members to organizations up to 5,000. Gotcha. So I can customize it to how many ever the information is. The data is going to be the data that we collect, whether you're 20 strong or 5,000 strong.
Gotcha.
But here's the good thing. it actually does a comparison with other organizations that look like you. So I'm going to compare your answers to another organization that has 20 individuals or 50 individuals, 1,000 individuals. That way, that score is weighted to now let you know that my efforts need to concentrate here to the organizations that are doing this thing the right way.
John, if somebody on this webcast who sees the recording wants to get in touch with your company, what's the best way to do it, Jonathan?
More likely email. And I'll put my email in the chat.
Okay.
And my granddaughter taught me this too. I didn't know what chat was. And she's 9 years old.
Okay. Well, there's diversity, right? Diversity is not only in color, diversity in age.
Right. Oh, and ageism is a big one now. So, our workforce is getting younger and younger, and the older people are being pushed out. So ageism is also a piece of diversity, equity, inclusion.
Yeah, well, I'm all about ageism. I'm behind
Me
that.
too.
I'll carry that flag for you, man. Yeah.
Hey, right, man, you have to go to the road with me when we talk about ageism.
Okay.
Hey, but I put my email in as Jon, Jon, at tier1management.net. That's my email.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Now, there's a couple of questions to us, Matt.
Yep, I got it. Let's since we only have two hands up, let's go ahead and let them, and they're veterans. They're veterans of the show, Jonathan. So Brian, why don't you try to keep it to a couple of minutes, ask your question of John.
Sure. And Matt, thanks for having this conversation today. And Jonathan, this is really a fantastic discussion. It's something I work a lot with small business owners, and I always tell them that DEI is a competitive advantage in business. That's the way you have to look at it. If everybody looks like you, sounds like you, thinks like you really only get like a 90-degree view of your world. Right. And now that the world's been turned upside down, it's a great opportunity to think outside your normal sectors, and that you can broaden the angle of your world to make it 360 degrees. But a couple of quick points. It's interesting. You said affirmative action versus DEI. Reminds me of back in the day, corporate social responsibility versus creating shared value. That win-win conversation that allows everybody to benefit from whatever projects or programs that are being created. But I wanted to make one point that, you said that creating a safe space to have uncomfortable conversations, and I wanted to add, without being canceled.
Right.
Because people don't always have ethical agendas. And we've seen it probably in the last 5 years where somebody steps off the median to say, I don't understand this. And they make a statement, and then they immediately get canceled. And everybody who's still on the median says, see what happened to that guy? Don't let that happen to you. Right. Don't ask those questions. So that prevents us from really, delving into that. So that really wasn't a safe space. Right. And that's, I think, what we have to get past if we truly want to see change. Right. It's a competitive advantage if you don't get canceled.
And Brian, you made two good points. One of the points was that, and I tell people this, or organizations, I tell them, being diverse affects your bottom line to the positive. You know that 67%, and these are proof points that I always point out, 67% of organizations that have female leadership see an increase in their bottom line revenue. An increase. Now that's data. That is proven data. So that's one point. And then number two, psychological safety. I should be allowed to have my opinion and be able to express it respectfully. Now, my opinion may be wrong, right? And that means I need training to understand why it's wrong, or training to understand who it affects. But if I'm in a room and this room, I'm hearing people cancel other people out, I'm going to be less likely to raise my hand to give my opinion, right? Because I'm seeing everybody else being canceled. No, we got to get rid of that mentality, right? And how do you do that? So it's a challenge for leaders to have this environment where it's we talk about belonging or well-being or psychological safety. And then sometimes you have to be trained on how do you make that happen, right? So I'm glad you made two great points there, Brian.
John, that's the only two great points Brian has made in over a year. So don't fill his head. Golly, that guy's got a bigger ego than the state of New York, and you just fed it. Oh my gosh.
Wow, my fault. Yeah. Hey, Matt, you're going to have to tell me about these folks before we get on next time, bro.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. I should have given you the scouting report. Chuck Cooper's next in line. Chuck's one of the nicest guys you know, not a self-promoter like Brian. So this should be a good one. Go ahead, Brian. Chuck.
Thanks, Matt. I appreciate that. Jonathan, it's great to have you on the webcast today. I love the topic of DE&I. I think it's something that obviously I'm in the HR consulting space, so we talk about this a lot. And I think it's perceived differently when we're talking with larger organizations versus the small to mid-sized companies. And one of the things we're talking a great deal about right now is how to have those conversations and to create that safe space. And it's a challenge for a lot of leaders to be open to the coaching that they need to be able to facilitate and to make those opportunities available to their people. But when it comes to DE&I, one of the questions I've got is, as we look at, basically going through the training of the program and implementing this into our company, as we look at this, the back end of this, we look at the stakeholders that are involved within the company. So you got your employees, you've got your vendors, you got your customers, the community that you're a part of. Mm-hmm. What are some good ways that we can communicate the results of DE&I to our stakeholders so that we can get that message out to have a positive impact?
All right. So remember I talked about coming up with strategy before training, because we don't know what sort of training an organization really doesn't know what sort of training they need, right? The training could be in, like we said, safe conversations. So with a lot of organizations, what we do is I do this assessment. So we do this online assessment, comes up with a score. And then that score helps you lead your strategy. So then my strategy becomes, oh man, so now based on this data that we've collected from this survey, we now know we need to concentrate in these 5 areas. So now let me come up with goals for those 5 areas. And then let me come up with initiatives to meet those 5 goals. Once I have that strategy, the goals and initiatives, then we can do a roadmap. We communicate that roadmap to all of our stakeholders, right? So like supplier diversity, if you look at my LinkedIn page, I just wrote an article about supplier diversity. So this roadmap is what we communicate. All right, so over the next, say 6 to 12 months, this is the goal. Here are our initiatives to meet that goal over the next 6 to 12 months, because you can't do everything all at once. All right, so then over the next 1 to 2 years, what are the goals that we're trying to achieve and what are the initiatives to meet that? And so then you create this dashboard. I work with an organization, they create these dashboards for me, which then publicizes it. So your community sees that in some cases, your employees see that, suppliers actually see that, but you can't just put it out there and then don't do anything about it. Those initiatives have to be worked. And so on your dashboard you have internally, you say, well, I have HR department working on this piece of it, or I've got this organization working on this piece. And you measure your effectiveness of those 5 goals and those initiatives. So at the end of the year, you go back and you say, okay, how do we do with this initiative? Because now you've publicized those goals and initiatives to the community. Does that make sense, Chuck? And we've had conversations where we tell, it's not just HR. A lot of times they just lump everything up under HR. They lump DE&I under HR, but it's not always just HR. And in some organizations say, no, we're creating a separate department and there are chief diversity officers now. So you know the C-suites are, right? The CEO, COO, CFO, and now you have a CDO, chief diversity officer, right? Who's responsible for creating these strategies and or training, because you don't want to add it all up on HR, because HR is traditionally, policies, procedures, recruiting, right? And so, but you don't want to just put DEI up underneath that because it just gets lost, in my opinion. So hopefully I answered.
John, thank you, Chuck. That was terrific. Jonathan, just comes to mind, and I'm one that likes to push agendas and don't mind getting people uncomfortable. How many of these CDOs, what percentage, if you had to, are white?
In over the last year, it's a small percentage, Matt.
Yeah, but how would it make a bigger impact? This is my point. Like, I like to go against the grain. Like, I would think it would be pretty cool if, maybe it wouldn't, but maybe it'd send a bigger signal if there was a white CDO that was driving that initiative. Would that be more impactful than having a person of color driving that? I don't know.
You want my honest opinion?
Yes. This all needs to be honest and open.
I'd rather have the CEO, who are traditionally white, lead the D&I effort.
Yep.
And they hire a CDO, a chief diversity officer, who is female, LGBTQ, a person of color, Asian, Black.
Gotcha.
But the CEO is the leader is leading the efforts because they are the top of the food chain.
Yeah, that's when I talk about culture. I say organizations are made up of three things. I just call it a triangle: talent, systems, culture. Talent, systems, culture. And the better your system, the better your culture, the better your talent will perform, the better you attract talent, retain talent. And people often put off the culture piece and try to delegate that. And that can't be delegated. That has to be led by the CEO. And I think this fits into that category because obviously it's a big part of culture. So that CEO can't just delegate it, and because everyone will feel that, everyone will see that it's not a priority to that CEO. So thank you for answering that question. Marlene from the Netherlands, Jonathan, she usually wins the award for the long distance award here at the Rebound Live webcast. If anybody is farther away than the Netherlands from the great state of North Carolina, please raise your hand.
Well, actually, Matt, I'm in my house in France. So the question should be, if you're further away than France, raise your hand. Okay. Which is a little bit closer than the Netherlands.
A little bit closer. Okay.
Little bit closer.
All right. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, Marlene. 2 minutes.
Oh, 2 minutes. Now I'll talk fast or I'll talk Dutch, then you won't know. No, I've just recently joined, or 2 years ago, I joined a consultancy company as their recruiter and HR manager. I kind of disagree with you, Jonathan, although I really support all of what you say, but I disagree on a little issue that I think that HR is important in this whole discussion, because they can be the one that mirrors to senior management, which in my case are 4 white, bald, 50+ men. When I joined, I was the first woman to join. And I'm so happy to say that. And what I see happening is that I've hired women of color with different backgrounds. The only issue still is that they need to be able to speak Dutch, because that's what our clients require. And one of the managers said the other day, yeah, I think we can recruit people that don't speak Dutch as long as they are like culturally the same as I am. And that's when I put up the mirror. I said, so you mean as long as they're white?
Right.
So he was
Marlene, what's your question to John, if you have one? Or
I have no question. I just wanted to share that John said that HR was not important, and I think
no. Yeah, and that's not what I meant, Marlene. Okay. HR is very important. In fact, HR creates the policies for us to do like recruiting, and sometimes, but not so HR looks at inequities as well, right? They look at inequities, they look at policies, they look at recruiting, and HR is a critical piece of this. What I'm saying though is that don't just put DE&I underneath HR. Sometimes it's very important, but we have to be congruent because HR is really leading our policies, procedures, recruiting efforts, making sure that we're doing and checking the right boxes off, right? So HR is very critical. So if I gave the impression that HR is not important, no, it's very important. I'm saying that diversity is equally as important as the HR function.
Yeah.
Yes, and
So
and HR can help, I think, to make the CEO of a company drive the discussion, because I totally agree with you. If they don't drive the discussion, if they put it out with HR or with a separate officer, then it's not truly there. It's just there for the figures,
Correct.
for the record, and not truly felt.
Yeah, perfect. Marlene, thank you so much. And I think what John, and this is, to me, this is communication. Like to coming together, like if you sent out a tweet, Jonathan, and it was misinterpreted by someone like say Marlene right there, she wouldn't have the chance to interact, and she might just blast a response. So the fact that we have this forum,
I wouldn't do that.
I know you wouldn't, but people do. And,
they do.
And the fact that you got to ask the question and you got the answer, now that brings us together. And at the end of the day, we also can agree we can agree to disagree in a respectful manner. So thank you, Marlene. Chuck, now careful here, John. Chuck is from Long Island, and us people from Long Island are unique in many ways.
I know you are, Matt.
And so Chuck, now I'm going to emphasize, Chuck, you got 2 minutes. And I'm giving you 2 minutes, okay? Chuck from Garden City. Go ahead, buddy.
The right side of the tracks. Jonathan, thanks for being on. It's amazing that people want to come on with this 60-year-old white guy. I mean, I don't know why. But
hey, Chuck, I can tell you why. My favorite team in the world is who? The Tar Heels. The favorite years was 81 to 84, 85. So that's the only reason. When Matt sent me a link, email or LinkedIn, I was like, first of all, what school did he go to? Did he play ball? Because I used to play ball. I'm like, okay, all right.
I guess it doesn't matter whether you're the starting 5 or the 12th guy on the team.
Easy, Chuck. Chuck, I've got control.
Okay, let me ask my question.
I've got control of the mute button. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the question I have for you is, I'm an independent sales guy. I'm not part of a company per se. But since the pandemic started and such, the way I used to do things is I used to love getting in rooms and communicating face to face and looking people, within the same room.
Yep.
But the problem I find that I'm having now is, with you talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, is when I get on calls like this, where I'm on video and stuff like that, I don't know who I'm going to be talking to until sometimes I get on the video or the call. And sometimes when I'm not talking to, say another white guy, and so to speak, but it could be from anyone from around the world at any point in time. I find, I'm not a guy that gets pretty, nervous or anything like that, but I do now find myself getting nervous and not quite, how am I supposed to handle those 3 topics now that it's a different type of environment we live in, as far as from this standpoint. Before pandemic, it was easier. Now we're in a totally different structure. The question how is the best way to handle that, if you would have an answer?
So here's the good thing, Chuck. I always get a positive out of a negative. The positive is it's causing you to think differently, right?
Absolutely.
If it was the status quo, you'd be thinking the same way that you've always thought. Because of this pandemic, sometimes born out of travesties is an opportunity. Now it's got you thinking differently. You're wondering, like, man, how should I communicate now, right? So because we always talk about psychological safety, it's in your brain now I need to now think differently. Maybe I need to watch my words. Maybe I shouldn't say what I'm thinking of, right? And those are those unconscious bias that we all have. How do you change those unconscious bias? It doesn't happen overnight. Like I remember I was transparent. I gave you the story about me and female truck drivers, right? That's my bias. I now understand because I have to think differently now. So then how do I change that perception? So let me be involved. Let me ask some questions of people who that don't look like me. So for you, since you're an independent salesperson, it's hard because we got this Zoom, and because of the pandemic, it's, we see pictures, but we don't really interact anymore, right? So for you, I would say if training might be good for you. Training, remember we talked about there's goals and initiatives, and one of the goals could be training for an organization. It wouldn't be first, but for you being independent, maybe I need to just take a course on unconscious bias to at least understand why I have these biases, or maybe how I should talk or think going forward. That would be my suggestion.
Fantastic. I appreciate it. Are there courses available of that?
Oh yeah, definitely. There's a group out there. There's a group out there called the Diversity Movement, and they're based in North Carolina, Raleigh, I think. And they have micro videos. I mean, like a 5-minute video that you could purchase, or a 10-minute video. And, I work with them a lot in terms of their training, because it seems it's not elongated, right? We're in a quick, fast microwave society. So you want the training to be quick, fast, in a hurry, but you're going to be able to learn something. So that organization, Matt, is actually based in North Carolina.
Nice.
Donnell. Thank you, Matt. Jonathan, thanks, man.
Did you say Donnell Thompson?
Yeah, he's a CEO. Yeah, he's been on my podcast a couple times.
Donnell Foots, the guy who played in the NFL?
No, you're thinking about Donnell Thompson as the checkers and rallies.
The restaurateur.
Yeah, restaurant guy. Now he's down here in. He lives out where I live at. He golfs at the same place I golf. And we hit people's houses.
Donnell's a Tar Heel. Yeah, yep. Good man. One Adam Zimbruski, if I say his name, Adam, I hope I said your last name properly. He said, not a question, but a comment. Culture training, DEI needs funding, a budget with multiple line items. CEOs just can't talk and promise to be better anymore. They need to put the money where their mouth is. If they can't sell it to the shareholders or the board, then they are unfit for the position. What's your response to that?
I told Adam I agree. So what happened? Let me give an example. There was a city council that wanted to do diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we did an assessment, and it came back that they probably need to hire a chief diversity officer in their organization. The city council and the mayor balked at that. They didn't want to do it, right? They thought that they could get this by doing training of their employees, and then that's it. And we actually went to the city council, and they were arguing amongst themselves in front of me, and I'm trying to present to them why they should do this. So about a year later, they came back and figured out that they needed to put into their budget a chief diversity officer position, because they were getting nowhere, and the community was in uproar about them not being more diverse. So the key there was that now they have to put this into their line item budget, this is really important. So I told Adam, I agree with Adam. So you got to put your money where your mouth is. And put the money there, you'll see the return. And that's why I like data. Again, the data will show you if you spend those dollars, it'll come back to you in revenue increase and employee engagement. So I told Adam, I agree. They can't just talk anymore. They've got to put that funding together.
That's right. I just made a comment in the chat. If you have any comments or questions and you don't want to ask on camera, I understand. Just put it in there. And I also want to say hello to Angelica from Croatia. Now, Croatia, I think, is a little bit farther than France. No, Marlene? Yeah. So she gets.
I think I lost this time.
Okay. So Angelica,
but I'm happy to. Very happy to.
The long distance award. I've been to Croatia, a beautiful country, Angelica, and great basketball players there.
Absolutely.
So yeah. Terry Lyons, TL from Holy Trinity High School on Long Island and the St. John's University. What do you got for us, Terry?
Hey, Matt, and thank you, Jonathan. I'll get right into it as I know the time is running. Jonathan, some of us were kids of the 60s, and we're about the same age, whatever. So, circling 1968 as one of the most terrible years, but then progress is made. and take it out to the Obama election in 2008 and whatnot. But then we've gone backwards. So I'd like to know what your insight is on those of us that really thought that progress was going to be made and now feel very sort of, I don't know, almost depressed or disheartened over it. And it's like the old game Chutes and Ladders, you feel like you're gone all the way back down to bottom again.
Yeah.
And it's just terrible.
And Terry, I feel the same way because, I grew up in the 60s as well. And you see incremental change. But then is that change fast enough? Is it really change that is inclusive of everyone? And then over the last year, we all had to open up our eyes, because of the George Floyd situation. Now, that doesn't mean that it wasn't happening before, but now it's broadcast. We have social media, we have we have the internet. And now it's becoming more apparent to everyone about all the inequities that has been going on for a while. Now, incremental change has been happening, right? Over the years, we see that, and that's positive. But is that change quick enough or fast enough? And is it really inclusive? So I struggle with the change we made to someone on the outside seems to be working, but are we really that of inclusive in society? For instance, I'll give you an example. People with disabilities. Before we think that there was incremental change by allowing them to do certain things, but it's lagging, right? I'll give you an example. My son-in-law has a company called iAccess Life. It's like Yelp for individuals who are disabled. And what they do is you go on the app and you say whether this organization is accessible or not to people who have disabilities. And it gives a rating to those organizations. Now those organizations know that maybe I need to put in a ramp, or maybe I need to be more inclusive. So even though there's incremental change that have been made, there are areas that we hadn't thought of before, which now need to be included as part of the discussion, right? And what happens is you have to change an individual's thinking. And that's the hardest thing to do, right? The hardest thing to do is change the way that someone thinks. How do we do that? It's still the challenge, right? Because I can talk about D&I and the positive effects and the net income that will be going to this organization. But if we haven't effectively changed the way that we think, nothing is going to happen. So that's why that effective change has to happen internally. And that's why I talk about these unconscious biases. We have to change the way we think, even though we have these biases. So, Terry, even though we think this incremental change has been going on and it's positive, there's a whole lot more that we're not doing that we now still need to do.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, Terry. Brian Kennedy writes in, we keep focusing on what to do in action without changing our hearts. The organization will do what a leader says to do, but that won't change the way people treat each other within the organization. Any thoughts on that comment, Jonathan? You mean repeat that?
But that's the challenge, right? You can't change somebody's heart a lot of the times, right? They grew up a certain way, they believe a certain way. I mean, just look at the political environment we're in. If you're Republican or Democrat, you're arguing across the table, and one says the sky is blue, the other one said no, it's green. And they staunchly believe that, right? So the difficult part is changing someone's heart, and that becomes more of I guess a spiritual based conversation, man. And yeah. I don't know how you change someone's heart unless something like negative really happens to them and they see things a different way. But that's the challenge.
When I do corporate talks, I talk about your life's impacted by three things. The people you meet, and it's one of the reasons I'm putting this together, because we're getting to meet you, Jonathan. The books you read, and the trauma in your life. And trauma could be a death, loss of a job. For me, it was loss of my job at North Carolina, and that impacted change. But we also talked about, and this could be another webcast, the impact of fatherless, children. They don't have two parents at home. One of the first things you discussed with me was your dad, the impact your dad had on you. Yeah. and that is important, but that's another podcast. Saeed writes in, thoughts on can we truly affect real change with focus on DE&I in the workplace, or will it take us really a generation to bring real change, where we talk about it in our private meetings? Also, have we overcorrected where now white males are now experiencing what our society is trying to change?
So, that's a great point. So I love and I hate the millennials. Because to me, sometimes one of my biases is I think the millennials are not as, they have the same work ethic that we had growing up, but they come up with smarter ways to do things, right? And so what I like though, in that comment, the first thing I thought of was that I think they're more inclusive than we are, or how we grew up. I think the younger generation is more inclusive and are more diverse and think differently than traditionally we have growing up. So they're not as homogeneous as we are. They are affecting change because they want things to look differently, and they grow up now differently. So I think with that comment, it says, have we overcorrected now? I think we may have overcorrected, but it's because we were supposed to. It's not the same. We don't look the same anymore, right? And we have more minorities coming into the country, right? I mean, we look different now. So we're overcorrecting, but that correction needed to happen. That's my comment on.
Gotcha. We have 2 minutes, and Jill Johnson, you wrote in, and Jill, if you want to talk, I'd love to hear your voice and see your face. Yeah, come on, join us. Ask your question live. I'd love to hear that from you for our audience and for John. Go ahead. Thank you, Jill.
Yeah, sure. Great to be here. It's interesting when I've heard a lot of my different friends and colleagues and associates talk about how the world has changed over the last 2 years. And what I point out is that for me, nothing has changed. The world is pretty much exactly the same, except there's more openness to having the conversations, which I think is great. But I have 4 sons who are Black sons. I worry about them just the same. I worry about them being stopped and confronted by police, et cetera. Those things haven't changed for me. And what's very interesting, when I look at President Obama, even the reference that's often made in diversity circles, that if you have women or if you have a diverse group leading, that the organization is better. The challenge is that what I really see is that those people who ascend to those levels are stellar in almost every way. They're exceptional individuals. When you look at Obama and the qualifications, there are very few people that have that level of qualification. And so it doesn't prove that your average random Black guy can be president. It proves that someone, the country was ready to elect someone who was thinking in the way that he was thinking at that level. And when you see women who are at the top of corporations, usually those women are so super qualified. It's not just a random woman. And so, I think that we have to be careful about the causation when we look at, diversity, that we have to really understand that in being inclusive, it's not just looking at the people who are at the very top, that someone has to be stellar in order to get the position. And I'll just give a really quick example. When I started my career at Goldman Sachs in the financial analyst program, in an analyst class of about 100, there were 5 of us who were Black. 4 of us came from Harvard, and the other person was from the University of Chicago. But the white people who were in the program were from a whole different range of schools. They were brilliant, exceptional, but they were able to come from a bunch of different schools. The Black people, we were not good enough unless we were from Harvard, essentially.
Yeah. And Jill, let me say something real quick. So I agree with you, because I back in 2015, I was trying to do cultural competency training to these police departments, because they were killing young Black men, people of color. Cultural competency I thought was going to be huge. And I was sending out the proposals to all the police department. Nobody responded. 2020 came. Those same organizations are now coming to me to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, the problem didn't change. It just became more apparent because now we're in the pandemic and then, George Floyd situation. So sometimes, like I say, out of travesty is born an opportunity. Unfortunately, like we've had these problems for years. We know that, Joe. I mean, I was in GE's financial management program. I was the only Black person that they selected countrywide to be in the F&P program. And they selected like 5 people for every GE location. So we've been feeling this for a while, but unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, these last 2.5 years have now brought this conversation to the forefront. Now we can have these conversations, right? Now we need to be more inclusive, and you don't have to be at the top of your class to be included into the game, right? I'm on the bench, but you don't know I'm a scorer. Now I'm able to get off the bench and score. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, thank you. Hey, listen, we have passed the 9 o'clock hour. However, this is really awesome stuff. And Jill, I wanted people to not only, this communications 50% body language and 35% tone. I wanted you to ask your question for all of us to feel that. And thank you. I'm getting goosebumps with your participation. So what I would like to do with John's blessing, we still have 39 people on, that if there's some questions, John, if we could go a little bonus section overtime, if you will, if you could stay on another 10, 15 minutes, we might have a couple more questions. If that's okay. If that's not okay, I get it. We can end right now.
Yeah, I got about 10 minutes.
Okay. All right. I'm going to reach out to Danita now. Danita, your head was shaking when Jill was talking, and I invited Danita to be on, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit because you've got a thought. I'd love you to share it. If not, I don't want to embarrass you. So I think at least we get to see your beautiful hat and glasses.
Thank you. I knew that head shaking was going to get me in trouble, but I totally agree with her comments and her commentary on how nothing has really changed as a Black female in the sports and finance industry. So I own a wealth management firm, Geist Wealth Management, and I've been working with professional and semi-professional athletes for 15 years now. And for me, nothing has really changed. It's still a struggle to get to the conversations that are easy for a lot of other people, white males in particular, to have. And there was one particular point I was thinking of possibly commenting on, so I'll say it, which is, I know John keeps saying, they don't get it. Like, we know as females, if you put us in the right positions, we make you way more money. Those studies have been proven over and over and over again. But the problem is the discomfort that it brings to change does not outweigh the monetary value, because they're already making money. And so when you're already making money hand over fist in your current situation, in your current system, then what's a couple of more cool $1 billion, especially if you're not directly impacted by that, it's not enough to push you out of your comfort zone into an unknown space. And so that's why people coil back and don't really want to include the metric. So I said I'm in wealth management. I'm a licensed insurance agent. So this year we had to take a DEI segment for our continuing education. And to be honest, as a Black female, I found it very, I didn't even read the material. I took the test and I got a 97. And my mom goes, well, why didn't you get 100? But because I got a definition mixed up. I don't know. But, it's like we're doing measures in a way to make people feel comfortable to blanket. What I'm trying to say is we're blanketing the process when, as a person of color, as a woman of color, I've had to learn all these years that I've been doing business. And so it's just, it's just rhetoric at this point to me to make me have to take a diversity and inclusion test just to check a box off, whereas that system will not produce or yield the fruit of change that people are talking about what they would like to see. So there's got to be a different measure, a different way, a different something.
So Danita, when I have my conversations with these organizations and my consultants that work with me, I tell them I don't want this to be a check the box compliance activity. Because a lot of people think that, oh, we'll just give you training and that answers the question. No. No, all you're doing is, and in fact, I'll give you an example. Sometimes the older white males will say, why do I gotta do this? And then they do it, they take this test, or they do the training, and then they go off in the world and then nothing changes. I'm saying that we now have to get to the point where it's not a check the box compliance activity, right? It can't be buried anymore. You can't just give me a test, check the box, and then put it in the back, and now I'm done. And then I'm still acting the same way I normally act. I still am rude. I still got my biases. It doesn't work like that. And so, change is hard. So if you think of a continuum, change initially introduced into an organization, it's going to come with pushback automatically. Any changing processes, changing systems. It's going to come with that. And then you got to get to that point. You still got to introduce that change to acceptance. And that happens over time. Like I say, D&I is more than just D&I. It's workforce equity, it's health equity, it's economic equity, right? Environmental equity, it's digital equity. And we got to get to the point where we address all those inequities to try to make change happen equitably. Like in the finance world. I'm giving a talk to someone about changing the banking systems for people trying to get mortgages. Why banks redline and I can't get a mortgage, but this person can. So it's a lot of things that we need to change, and it's going to come with heartache at first.
Well, and then you also see those people abusing the system, and I won't name organizations, but you see that abuse of checking the box. So in New York, where my office is, I'm on Wall Street in the financial district, getting a minority and diverse, the MWBE certification, the Minority Women in Business certification was like bone chilling because of these men that will, sorry guys, but these men, the white man who will throw his wife on all of a sudden as half owner of the company to get the diverse contracts that minorities are missing out on. And so they're doing their diligent work, these organizations, but it's just overrun almost by people who want to just check the box to be able to get into the room and not lose their position or lose what they've already been a privilege to, that these systems have been set up to actually improve. So it's a lot of where while you're trying to clean the water, somebody's trying to muddy the water again.
Yeah. Danita, thank you so much. I hate to cut this short, but Jonathan promised us an extra 10 minutes. It's now 9:10. Danita, thank you. I knew you had something in there I wanted to bring out, and it was for all our benefits because this is a safe place. And I don't take any of this personally. I want to learn and grow. That's the motto of my coaching practice, Starty Coaching, learn and grow. And I learned and grew from each and every one of you, especially Jill and Danita at the end. Thank you so much. Jonathan, we could have a part 2 down the road.
D&I 2.0, Matt.
Yeah, it was awesome. Man, we got a lot of work to do, but thank you very much. Our next webcast, August 2nd, CEO Jennifer Murphy, all right, female CEO, quantum improvements, talking about augmented reality and virtual reality and how that impacts learning. So thank you so much, Jonathan. Awesome. Let's go tee it up soon.
Yeah, we will. Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Matt, John, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Danita, thank you. You're awesome.
You're welcome. I was sitting here just reading the last bit of the comments.
Yeah, no, you were awesome. Thank you. I saw you nodding, and I'm an executive coach, so I read the room. And when somebody's got a thought and they're not wanting to raise their hand, I'm going to pick on them.
It's okay. I'm used to it.
Yeah, but that was awesome. I mean, you probably said what a lot of people were thinking, and especially women of color, and you know, that was awesome. And that this was a safe place. Like, you know, you said, I will apologize to the white men out there, or that's me. That's okay. Like that, I want to know how you feel. And that's where, like, it's not safe anymore because people don't have time, and it's social media, and they just slam you, or what do you call it? Eliminate you, cancel culture. And like, no, I want to know how you feel, and I'll tell you how I feel. And a lot of it's fears, right? It's fears that we're going to lose our power, we're going to lose our control. Yep. And so we're going to try to keep control as long as we can. But is that really is that good for the world? Right. And so I think having this conversation is so powerful. Thank you for joining, Danita. Awesome.
Yeah, for sure. It's something that it's a passion of mine, especially working with the NIL and college athletes and seeing how that fear is trying to shape a whole industry to prevent young kids making a way for themselves. I mean, it's really the same of how that fear has prevented so many people from getting in the positions or establishing the business and growing it to the healthiest space because of those inherent biases and or fears that we've been taught, generationally. So the only way to get through it is to talk about it. And, you gingerly talk about it, but you have to be tongue in cheek. It cannot be sugar coated. It just has to be what it is, because you don't know what my experience is as a Black woman. Right. And I don't know what your experience is as a white male until and I'm 40, I'll be 46 next month. And until we discuss what those experiences are like, you would never know. So
that's why I do this. That's why I have this forum. It's so beautiful that you came on, the timing, and you did it. I mean, just like a couple days ago, I invited you on and you said, yeah, I'll be there. And that's awesome, Danita. Yeah, man, we'll have more of this. You live in New York City?
I'm between New York and North Carolina. Right now I'm at the lake in High Point. So I'll be back in New York in a couple of weeks.
Well, I'm in New York right now, out in the Hamptons with my family, and be back in North Carolina. And then I'll see you at Georgia's golf outing. Is that right?
Yes. Okay, yeah. So when I'm in New York, I'm in Brooklyn. Yeah.
Okay, Brooklyn. Yeah, Brooklyn. My dad's from Greenpoint originally.
Okay. Yeah.
I grew up.
We're down near Coney Island.
Okay.
Yeah, down in Midwood.
Yeah, well, be safe on the subways, man. The subways are nuts these days, as you know. Yeah. So, all right, Danita, thank you so much. Yep. Take care.
Thank you. All righty.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.